All right, there's been a lot of talk lately about whether carburetors are metered fuel leaks, and I'm genuinely concerned for the human condition if people seem to believe that the carburetor is a metered fuel leak. I know some people say it because it's easier than explaining what a carburetor is, but we need to stop spreading this because there are young people in my generation and in the newer generations that hear that and they just repeat what's told to them. They don't understand it, and it's being disregarded as bad technology because of it. Without getting into the carburetor versus fuel injection debate, carburetor wins, by the way. Technically mechanical fuel injection, but without getting into that debate, a carburetor is not a metered fuel leak. So, we got our throttle control here, and if we look down, you see the throttle blades opening. A carburetor is a mixing device. It uses the suction of the engine to suck fuel from the bowl up, through, and down the booster into the venturi, where that distance between the booster and the venturi, that inch and a half, that's where it mixes the air and fuel. And then once it's in the intake, you've got your big runner here. This is where it twists and turns and tumbles. It hits the back of the intake valve, gets heated on the intake valve, pours into the cylinder, is heated by the heat of the cylinder, heated by the piston, heated by the cylinder head, and you've got your mixing and atomization you've got your atomization and vaporization going on in here. If you're genuinely curious, for those of you who are younger or just people who are interested, I can explain this much better in depth, but this video is about carburetors being a metered fuel leak. There is no part where your carburetor should ever be dripping fuel from the boosters or leaking fuel. The disadvantage of the carburetor's design is simply that it can't compensate for things like altitude and air density, which generally are the only real issues. Altitude, air density, because they go hand in hand. But no, a carburetor is not a metered fuel leak. If we want to be technical about it, before we take a look at some fuel injection, take a look at a Holley style carburetor, because Holley and Edelbrock are basically your two flavors of carburetor. Demon, Brawler, Quick Fuel, they're all owned by those companies. So, Holley carburetor, boom, right here, right there. I know my phone's kind of shading it. Same setup. You got a booster, you've got your throttle blades. When the throttle blades open, it exposes the booster that lives in the venturi to the engine vacuum. That vacuum sucks the fuel in. I wouldn't call that a leak in any way, shape, or form. Now, this is 9-liter International, mechanically fuel injected, but the principle of mechanical injection and electric injection are the exact same. It's how the injectors are fired is what's really different. So, if we look at it, we got our 8-cylinder fuel pump right here. This is our high-pressure injection pump. Fuel is pressurized in this pump. We'll use this one here. Is stored in this line. It really is stored in the line until the spring in the injector is overcome. That pressure is overcome and it sprays fuel in. I would argue any form of injection is more of a fuel leak than a carburetor is. We can also take a look at something a bit more conventional here. My 92 Ford meets the pinnacle of what most people consider modern fuel injection. Yes, the way it calculates the ratio and the computer itself is antiquated, but functionally, when you say fuel injection, this is the type of fuel injection that runs through most people's heads. Oh, dumpies. Okay, so, boom. 5.8 EFI. So if we come down here, you see this little orange bit, we got our fuel rail. So technically speaking, I guess this is common rail injection, isn't it? Common rail port injection. We got our fuel rail pressurized by the fuel pumps in the tank. And with that little orange piece there is the injector and wire. Fuel is stored in the rail at a pressure. When it's time for that cylinder to fire, the wire's coming in there, I'll actuate a cylinder in there and make the engine squirt the fuel in. I would argue that is 1,000,000 times more of a fuel leak than any carburetor could, would, or will ever be. Now, my concern about the fuel leak conversation is simply this. When people say, oh, a carburetor's a fuel leak, people are going to think it's normal to see fuel dripping out of their boosters. That's a problem. And I know there are some people who are talking about it and trying to put good information out there. Maybe I'll go ahead and do it too, just because young people have a short attention span and I could get through to them a little bit. But I just want to put it out there. Not a metered fuel leak. Stop calling it a metered fuel leak. If after seeing this, you're still under the pretense that a carburetor is a metered fuel leak, go lay down. You've spent way too much time in the sun. You've killed way too many brain cells. They're a mixture device, not a fuel leak. If yours is leaking fuel, stop, fix it. That's it.